In today's Feldenkrais lesson we're going to be exploring how to improve the ability to turn to look around yourself. Welcome to the studio at Wardley. Today's lesson is about how to improve the ability to turn to look around yourself. Moshe Feldenkrais wrote a popular book called Awareness Through Movement, and at the beginning of that book, in the first chapter, he opens by saying that we act in accordance with our self-image. What does that mean? Well, to give you a concrete example, if I work with someone for the first time and they are complaining of a stiff neck or difficulty, say, in reversing in their car because they don't find it so easily to turn to look behind them, I'll often ask them just to show me at the beginning how it is that they turn to look towards one side or the other. And this is the kind of thing that they do. In other words, the movement to look around themselves, how they understand the movement, is essentially to use just this part of the spine. In other words, the upper cervical spine. And there's very little participation in the movement of the ribs and the chest and the pelvis, the knees and the feet. And this lesson is a great lesson to show those people how they can change their image of the movement to radically improve that particular function. So as you can see, I'm doing the lesson sitting down. I'm sitting on a stool. I like the stool because it's got a flat surface, and also it's easier for demonstration purposes to use the stool. It's absolutely fine to be doing the lesson in a chair. If you are using a chair, however, just be careful that the height of the chair is appropriate. In other words, if the seat of the chair is too low, the knees will often be higher than the hip joints, and that can cause you to round the back. Equally, if the shape of the seat is higher at the front and lower at the back, then that too can cause you to roll more towards the back part of the sit bones, towards your sacrum. So it's much better to have a chair that enables your hip joints to be more or less in line with the knees, or even a little bit higher. Once you've got an appropriate chair, just take a moment to sit in the chair to notice how it is you're sitting. Are your feet together? Are they wide apart? Are the feet tucked behind the knees? Is there a difference in terms of how you've chosen to place the 2 feet? How is the back? Are you getting a sense that you're rounding the back and shortening through the back of the neck? How is it that you're sitting? And then once you've assessed how you're sitting, for the purposes of this lesson, see if you can come forward towards the front edge of the seat of your chair or stool, and then have the feet more or less about hip distance apart, and so that the heels are underneath the knees, so not tucked behind the knees, and equally not too far forward. And then equally check that your feet aren't wider than the knees or closer together than the knees. In other words, you're trying to find the support of your skeleton so that you have the support of the feet, the legs and your 2 sit bones. And then begin to do a movement of just moving your right knee a little bit forward and a little bit back. A little bit forward and a little bit back. Try to keep the feet pretty much where they are. So you're not sliding the feet forward and back, you're keeping the feet more or less where they are, and then just sliding the right knee a little bit forward and a little bit back. And you'll begin to notice as you're doing this that although the instruction is given in terms of the knee coming forward and back to its starting position, there's movement of the pelvis. The right side of the pelvis also begins to come forward and a little bit back. See if you can notice that. What's happened in fact is my weight has shifted a little bit over onto my left sit bone to free up the right sit bone, the right side of the pelvis, so that it can help with the movement of the knee forward and back. Now, as you just continue to do this movement, then just notice what's happening with the breath. So quite often when you begin a new movement where people are asked to do a new thing, tendency is often to hold the breath, and what that does, of course, is not just the breath that you're holding, it's the ribs, the chest, muscles will stiffen. So see if, as you do this movement, you can just let your breath be nice and easy. So not holding the breath. And then once you've done this movement of taking the knee forward and back, just pause. And again, for the purposes of the recording, I'll keep the lesson going at a reasonable pace. But if you need to take a longer rest or do more repetitions, then please just pause the recording to give yourself that time. Once you've rested, then this time take the right knee backwards a little bit and then bring it back to its starting position. So I'm just thinking of sliding the knee straight backwards and then bring it back to its starting position, and trying to keep again the feet more or less where they are. So I'm not shifting the feet, I'm just thinking of sliding the knee a little bit back and then back to its starting position. And again, because the knee moves, then the femur, the thigh bone, moves back and the right side of the pelvis begins to turn back too. Just getting used to that movement. You can perhaps sense again how there's a shift of weight over onto the other side, a little bit of a shift of weight to free up the sit bone on the right hand side to do this movement. And then pause again, and then begin to combine these two directions. So just allowing the right knee to come a little bit forward and then going a little bit back. So forward and backwards. And as I'm coming forward with the knee, I'm not thinking of it going out to the side or into the midline. I'm literally just thinking of it going straight forward and straight back. Straight forward and then straight back. Now pause, and now this time think of taking the right knee forward again and allow the head and eyes to turn also, for me it's to the left, you may have gone to the other direction, and then come back. So as the knee goes forward, I allow the head and eyes to turn a little bit to the left and then come back. And I really am looking for an easy range, so I'm not looking to strain or try and see as far as I absolutely can. I'm just looking for a very easy range where I can also keep my head and eyes pretty much looking on the horizon. So notice if as you're doing this movement, do your eyes tend to drop down at the floor? And if so, can you keep them more or less scanning the horizon? And you'll begin to notice now that as you allow the head and eyes to participate, you'll perhaps also feel there's a bit more involvement in the shoulders and the ribs and the chest also turning to the side. Now, the next time you do this, also pay attention to the breath. So again, just checking that you're not holding the breath. The jaw is nice and free, you're not clenching there. And notice, do you tend to do this movement as you breathe in and then exhale to come back, or breathing out to come back, or do you breathe out to turn and inhale to come back? And it doesn't really matter which of those options you choose. Much better though to breathe, so that whatever you're doing, whichever breath pattern, you're not holding the breath. Now, the next time you turn, allowing the knee to come forward and turn to look towards the side, pause there and just notice, is there an object in your room that you can identify on the horizon that marks the place where you've been easily able to turn? So as I look to my left, there's some cupboard doors there with some black knobs on, and that sort of marks an easy marker or note of where I'm able to easily turn now. For you it might be more here, it might be further. Whichever it is absolutely fine. Just note that and then come back to centre. Again, if you need to pause, please do so. But now the next time you bring the right knee forward, think of allowing the ribs to turn, the shoulders to turn. See if you can keep your head and eyes looking forward. And then come back with the knee and the pelvis and the ribs and the chest. So you stay looking forward with the head and eyes. The right knee will slide forward. The right side of the pelvis will follow the ribs, the shoulders and the chest. And you can see, in fact, how my hands, I'm using those also to help. So my right hand is sliding a little bit forward, my left hand a little bit back, but keeping the head and eyes looking forward and then coming back. So in other words, as we're doing this together, we're beginning to differentiate the movement of the head and the neck from the shoulder, the chest, the ribs and the pelvis, and then come back. Again, just check as you're doing this that you're not holding the breath or stiffening through the jaw. Keeping the head and eyes looking forward as everything else turns to the side, and then come back. Now, the next time is a more complex variation. This time, see if you can keep your eyes looking forward and still allow the right knee, the pelvis to turn, the ribs, the shoulders and the head to turn to, but keeping the eyes looking forward and then come back. Now, I wear glasses. I need the glasses to see the camera and the camera screen. But if you do wear glasses like me as you're doing this lesson, then be careful to try and find the corner of your eye as you allow everything else to turn, and not just the corner of your glasses, because the two may be a very different thing. So you're trying to keep the eyes looking forward as everything else turns to the side. For me it's to the left, and then come back. It's funny, I always think of Victoria Beckham doing her pose when I do this. Now, again, if you need to do that more, if you find pleasure in it, then continue. If it's not so comfortable, then just don't do it. That's an important thing to remember. Now, once again you've rested enough, then as you return to turning, this time allow the head and eyes to begin to lead the movement. Still thinking of the knee, the right knee coming forward, the hands, the shoulders, the chest involved. And now notice, where can you see on the horizon comfortably now? And I stress the word comfortably because it really isn't in any Feldenkrais lesson about straining. You're always looking for an easy movement that enables you to keep your breath soft and free. So the head and eyes lead as you're turning, and now suddenly if I just pause, whereas before I could notice the knobs on the cupboard at the side, now I can look much more easily into this area behind me, and then come back. And I hope you've been able to notice a similar improvement just by paying attention to some of these details as we begin to differentiate some of the movements that form the ability to turn easily, to look around yourself. Now, the next time you turn, again to the side, for me it's to the left, allowing the knee to come forward, the head and eyes to lead, find the spot that you can now comfortably identify on the horizon, and now keep the head and eyes looking at that spot, but think of the knee coming back, the pelvis returning, the ribs and the shoulder, and then the head and eyes return to look at the front. So it's almost the head and eyes linger on the spot that you've identified. So again, as you turn, letting the head and eyes be involved now, the knee slides forward, the pelvis gets involved, the ribs and the shoulders. I find that spot, and then I linger with the head and eyes on that spot, but allow everything else to turn, and then bring the head and eyes back to centre. So again, you turn, the knee slides forward, the head and eyes lead the movement, and I linger with the head and eyes as everything else begins to turn back to the front. And it's quite hard to keep the head and eyes lingering, but you just do what you can comfortably do. And now we'll go for another more complex differentiation, this time keeping the eyes lingering. So you turn, head and eyes turn, find your spot with the eyes and the head, and now see if you can allow everything else to turn. The head also turns back, but you're trying to keep the eyes lingering on that spot so they're the last thing to come back to centre. And again, if you wear glasses, try to find the corner of your eye. So everything turns to look towards the side. For me it's the left. I find my spot, leave the eyes there, lingering, and then allow everything else to turn. That's a good place to rest if you need to rest. Maybe it's easier for you to walk around the room, just give you a change from the position on the chair. But when you do come back, then just now test your ability to turn to look towards the left. If you think of what we've been using now, so that the knee, the right knee slides forward, the pelvis begins to turn, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the head and eyes. And notice now, as your ability to turn improves. So whereas before I was here, I can now sort of comfortably turn to here to look around myself and then come back. Now your improvement may not be as far as that, it may be more towards this area of the room. Again, it's absolutely fine. I've done this lesson many times now, so I'm sort of used to the sequence and the movement, and it's something I like to do when I am sitting, because it's a great way just to get the spine and everything else moving. So let's begin to explore the other side. So with your other knee now, for me it's the left knee, begin to move that knee a little bit forward and then take it a little bit back straight away. So you're beginning to explore the two directions, forward and backwards. Notice how, again, the left side of the pelvis, does that become involved? Can you feel the shift of weight onto the other sit bone? Do you sense how, as the pelvis comes forward, some of the ribs get involved in the movement? Noticing also how the pressure shifts underneath the feet as the knee slides forward and back. And now begin to include the head and eyes to look to the other side and then come back to centre. So keeping the eyes as much as possible on your horizon, so rather than looking down at the floor, see if you can maintain the horizon. And you'll see also I'm allowing my hands to slide a little bit on my thighs. What that begins to do is encourage the shoulders to turn. And then find again a spot on the horizon that you can comfortably identify. So automatically to this side, my ability to turn easily has improved because no doubt of the work I've done on the other side. So here I can comfortably see more or less in this direction without straining the neck or anything like that. So, and then I come back now that I've noticed that spot, and then the next time I think of the knee moving forward, the other knee in fact slides a little bit back, I turn, and then keep the head and eyes lingering on that spot that you've identified, allow everything to come back to centre, and then the head and eyes return to the front. So you think of turning, the knee, the left knee coming forward, you turn to the side, keep the head and eyes lingering on the point that you've identified, and then return to centre. Again, turning, keep the head and eyes lingering on the spot, allow everything to turn back, and then the head and eyes return. And then the next time, see if you can just allow the eyes to linger on that spot. So you turn to the side, the knee comes forward, the hands slide, and now I'm just trying to keep the eyes looking on that spot, thinking of the knee coming back, the pelvis, the head. I'm trying to keep the eyes lingering as long as possible in the corner of my eye, and then coming back to centre. One of the great things about Feldenkrais, I think, is he uses these eye movements a lot in his teaching. As we get older, a lot of people, their ability to differentiate the eye movements from the rest of themselves gets a little bit compromised, so that to turn the eyes, sometimes the head turns, there's no relative movement of the eyes to the head. So for some people it's in fact everything having to move as one in order to be able to turn to see something. So by practicing these movements in the awareness through movement lessons, always paying attention to doing what's easy and comfortable to do, giving yourself enough time to assimilate and digest the lesson, then hopefully those kind of abilities will improve. So now that we've had that little rest, this time again test the movement in the sense that you allow the left knee to come forward, you allow the pelvis to turn, the ribs to turn, the chest and the shoulders, excuse me, and the head and eyes. And now suddenly here's kind of my comfortable spot on the horizon, whereas before it was here. And then I come back to centre. Okay, you can try that again. So then the left knee for me comes forward and everything else turns, and then come back to centre. So now the next time, instead of turning the head and eyes, keep the head and eyes focused forward. So the left knee will come forward, the pelvis will begin to turn, and I allow my shoulders, the chest to turn, but I keep my head and eyes looking forward, again doing my Victoria Beckham pose, and then come back to centre. So again, you can keep the head and eyes looking forward, but allowing the knees to move, the pelvis, the ribs, the shoulders, and then come back to centre. Just checking as you're doing this that you're again not holding the breath, the jaw stays nice and soft, and then come back. And then the next time, see as you turn everything to the side, see if you can keep just the eyes looking forward, trying to find the corner of your eyes, if you wear glasses, not just the corner of your spectacles, and then come back. Probably looks a bit strange from your point of view. It can feel a bit strange to do it as well, but just see what you can do. There may be certain parts of this movement where suddenly things begin to feel a little bit jerky, so that's probably the point where you need to pause, check you're not overly straining, everything else is as relaxed as possible, and then come back to centre. Now, once you've done that a few times, then again if you need to rest, please do so, but now try to test the movement. So think of the head and eyes on the horizon leading now the movement to turn to look around yourself, and then bingo, I'm sort of reaching, looking here comfortably, and then come back to centre. So again, allowing everything else to turn, the head and eyes leading, even better, I'm here now, and then come back to centre. So pause again if you need to rest, but now let's just explore both directions to see how things have changed. So I'm going to go to my left first of all. So again, I think of the head and eyes leading, I allow the right knee to come forward, my hands slide a little bit on the thighs, I'm thinking of staying quite tall, head and eyes to turn, and I can see here comfortably, come back, and then I'll go the other direction, so left knee coming forward, right knee back, head and eyes leading the movement to come back, and then come back. Let's go from side to side, again just within your comfortable range. Please don't think that you have to copy my range or strain to do so. Really encourage you just to do what's comfortable and easy, and then come back. And to refine this even more, here's another variation where you keep now the head and eyes looking forward, but now I'm going to turn everything to look towards my left and then towards my right. So I'm just trying to keep the head and eyes looking forward as everything else shifts around to one side and then the other. And now, to make it again more complex, see if you can just keep the eyes looking forward as everything else turns. Noticing is it one direction, one side, is it easier to turn to and keep the eyes looking forward compared to the other. And then pause, and now begin to allow the head and eyes again to lead the turn. So, but allowing the knee, of course, the knees to participate, to turn. And now I can easily see right behind me and right behind me. Isn't that amazing? That's why I love Feldenkrais. I love the ability that these lessons have to bring about change in people in a relatively short period of time. So you can imagine that if I give that lesson, or I go through that lesson with somebody who has been having difficulty turning, what we have been doing through the physical movements is actually refining their image of the movement of turning. Whereas before, their understanding in their bodies, in their minds, whatever, their understanding of this movement of turning to look towards the side is essentially this. It's almost as though they've forgotten that they can use, that they're allowed to use this part of themselves in the movement. So by reminding them almost through the movement that actually this can all be part of turning to look towards the side, then without doing lots of exercises, suddenly there's been an improvement in a person's ability to interact with their environment. And you can imagine that even, for example, if your difficulty is in reversing a car, even though the seat of the car, the back of the car seat, or say a seat belt is obviously restricting their movement to some degree, you can, even in a car seat, you can think of a knee pressing back and the pelvis pressing back and the ribs pressing back and a shoulder to begin to get, even in a car seat, more of the spine involved in the ability to turn to look around yourself. I hope you've enjoyed the lesson. Please feel free to comment in the comment section below. And if you like the lesson, please hit the like button. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to my YouTube channel.